Hi everyone. I'm Kristof Philips, the COO for TCR International. Let me briefly start by introducing maybe TCR as a company. So TCR is a company that offers sustainable apron solutions. I know it sounds a bit fluffy, but it's actually very practical. So what it means is that we offer GSC and airport infrastructure solutions as a rental solution. We offer, for example, also maintenance and apron support services. And we also offer integrated telematics solutions, so fleet management solutions to help assess and develop strategies around infrastructure and battery management. But as you can imagine, we're not here today to talk about TCR. We're here to elaborate on the Apron trilemma. So let me start by maybe explaining how I got to that concept and to that idea. So 5 years ago, I joined TCR. And before I was working as a managing director for the recycling business, glass recycling business in Belgium. So sustainability has always been very important to me as an individual, but also in a professional environment. So when I joined TCR, before joining, I actually made an assessment to check, okay, what's the value of this company and what's the market they're operating in? It's very obvious, of course, to say aviation is aviation, and you see all the big airport names, you see all the big airlines, very famous brands and companies. But when you take a deep dive a bit more in detail and you look behind who's owning those companies, then you will see that it's often financial hedge funds, it's private equities, it's pension funds. And these are typically companies that have an extreme strong focus on ESG, environmental, social governance. So for me, that made sense because when I was then looking at, let's say, the ambitions, the targets that people were setting, then yes, they were very ambitious. You could see that by 2050, we would like to be carbon neutral. This is a commitment that 200 airports altogether signed up to. That would mean that if you would look at the scope of Europe, for example, that would mean that we would be able to save around 3.5 million tons of CO2 per annum if we would be able to electrify, to greenify, because we always talk about electrification, but there are alternatives. But if we would be able to greenify the fleet in Europe across different airports. If you would then add up all those projects and those ambitions, then it's a number that we got out of a study from IATA, but then you would end up with an investment commitment or idea of 26 billion. So very ambitious. Okay, I joined the company and I thought, okay, I'll have a walk around, I have some chats with the customers and so on and so on. So what did we notice, or what did I notice actually as an individual, is that, look, actually there is there's a lack of infrastructure, there's a lack of charging infrastructure. There is also, when assets are replaced because of age or valid other reasons, then often they're not replaced. The diesel is not replaced with a more environmental friendly solution. Often diesel is replaced with diesel. Also, our ability to identify what's the options and the opportunities for us to measure and to objectively assess what is a good solution and a sustainable solution, it's non-existing. So that has led me to organize or set up a survey across our customer base. And there were a couple of questions we've asked, but the two main ones I would like to address is who has actually addressed or actually realized the ambitions they have set forward in their annual reports, in their strategic ESG plans, and who's actually believing that the ones they have set and defined for the future, they will realize them. These are questions I could ask to all of you, and I think the answers would be probably very similar. What was quite surprising to me as a new member to the community is that only 10% actually believed they would be able, not if they didn't want to, but would be able to deliver on the commitments or the ambitions they would have set forward. So a question that pops up into my mind is then, are we fooling ourselves? Very ambitious, but in reality, there seems to be a discrepancy. I can confirm that I'm convinced that it's not a matter of not having the ambition or not being honest and fair about it. But when you look at the Apron, when you look at the stakeholders on an air side, there is a lot of conflicting objectives. Just giving some examples. A handler, for example, an airline wants to go green, perfect. The handler is going to be asked to make an investment if it's an independent or a ground handler or an airline handler, and they're going to be asked to make an investment. An investment in capital, in assets that support that green solution. But there is a discrepancy because they're going to be asked to invest capital, but the commitment they get from an airline often in average is between 3 and 5 years, being it a permit, being it a contract duration. So of course there are certain airports where it's longer and there are certain airports where it's shorter, but in average it's a commitment they get for 3 to 5 years. So asking someone to invest intensively without an ability to recover that investment over a certain duration makes it more difficult. The same between the airport and the handler. We have had situations where a handler comes with GSC on the airport, and then there is a lack of infrastructure, and the ability to invest in the infrastructure is because of CapEx constraints not possible, or because of lack of space, for example. It's very difficult to do. One relationship that is very often overlooked is, of course, the relation between the passenger and an airline. The passenger, in the end, is also a key stakeholder. And if I only ask that same question to my friends and my family, would you be willing to pay more for a more sustainable flight? The answer is not unanimously yes, to be very honest. So even if those conflicting objectives are there, when you look at how people communicate in that community, they're typically communicating one towards the other. So it's all about, I talk to the airport talks to someone else, and so on and so on. But what is missing is that ability to interact as a community and to have an integrator, to have an integrated approach that addresses everything. So this realization actually steered me towards what I would call the Apron trilemma. As you can see, the Apron trilemma is actually composed out of three main components. It's a component of sustainability, one of affordability, and one component is the continuity. What do we mean with sustainability? Sustainability, it's self-explanatory. It's exactly what you would interpret. It's about environmental. It's about having a secured future for our family, friends, children, by investing in means that don't damage the environment in the long term. Continuity actually has two layers of interpretation. One layer is, it's about security of provision. It means that if tomorrow we would all invest in electrification, as an example, and we would invest in power supply, in assets, in anything that is needed to support it, but at the same time, every household is stimulated to go to electrical cars. Can we guarantee that there will be enough power, electricity, to support the needs of the industry, of the Apron setup, and the households? If the answer is no, it's conflicting. And then the last, but the very obvious one, is affordability. We all want to go green. That's reality. But there is a price. And is that price supported or defendable in the mindset of shareholders? Because in the end, every company needs to be profitable while being as sustainable as possible. So the challenge will always be, how do we manage the best optimal solution for the three components? And having two out of the three balanced is very straightforward, but it's extremely difficult to have third one also being balanced. So this exercise of trying to link the three components together and map this out needs to be done by every stakeholder. And you will see that you will get a graph which is actually within the triangle you see on the left. Of course, this assessment, and that's where it goes often very wrong, is it doesn't have to be done by the airport on their own, or by a handler, or by an airline. It needs to be done by all the stakeholders independently, and then you need to put it in overlay. And once you overlay the three outcomes, or the four or the five outcomes, whatever they may be, for a specific solution that is proposed, then you have to find the commonalities. And once you find the maximum of commonalities, you will have the ability to start talking about topics like, am I going to look for a solution that is addressing the stakeholder, myself, or the community? Am I going to act as an enabler or an imposer? Who's actually having the benefit and who's having the burden? And is this solution something that I do for the short term because I believe I won't be long in that environment because it's a very dynamic environment? Or is this the short term? So in order to manage that, it's extremely important that you have the right tools. And so you can see this is just an example of tools that are used, and telematics as an example is a very important one. So I always give the same example. It's overlooked. When people talk about green, they always talk about, I need a massive investment in infrastructure, it's a multi-billion project, I need a substation, and so on and so on. Actually, it can start with simple things. Look at the non-motorized fleet. Non-motorized fleet is the biggest portion of what is on an airport, and it's often overlooked. It's not costing a lot, but know that around every handler has around 30% excess of it on the ramp. Why? It's not that costly. People don't really know where it is, and people are using each other's, as you all know. So it's the same when you renovate a house. When you renovate a house, you're also not going to start renovating without removing the fixtures on the wall, without removing the carpet. So in order to have a clean environment, you will have to strip away all the clutter. Well, an apron is not a blank canvas. So remove the non-motorized where possible, because if you know that non-motorized is the biggest in volume, it takes a lot of space and capacity. If you know that it's one of the main causes of accidents, you can also imagine what it will do for the additional impact it has on motorized fleet. Because by having damages and accidents, you will have additional fleet requirements in order to compensate for the outages. So start with the simple things that don't cost a lot, but help you to enable solutions. So it's a short session. It's just to trigger a discussion and a reflection. But in summary of what I just presented, I just want to give you the message that the time is now. Some people may disagree, fair enough, but I do believe, even if it's COVID, it's more than ever the time to think, are we doing what is needed? Do we believe what we're doing is right? And if not, then let's tackle it now. So remember, going green is a journey, and it requires the Apron trilemma to be resolved. So I can only say we reach out our hand as one of the stakeholders, and we hope we can all embark on this journey. Thank you for your time.